Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Pre-ETS Representative Pre-ETS Training Module number 2, which will be a deeper dive into pre-employment transition services. First, I want to note that we are giving you a lot of information in these training modules, and it might seem overwhelming at first. Know that you aren't expected to do these trainings one time and remember everything. It is recommended that you watch these more than once and over time, and that you keep the PowerPoint slides handy as a way to guide you through delivering services in the future. This training is the second module in a series of 6 that were recorded in February of 2021 for Pre-ETS representatives. And here is our agenda for this module. First, I will be reviewing the purpose of pre-employment transition services. Then we'll review the definition of a student with a disability for Pre-ETS purposes. We will dig into the 5 required pre-employment transition services. We'll go over the 3 other Pre-ETS categories. We'll talk a little bit about Pre-ETS resources, and then we'll end with one final quiz. So let's get into the purpose of pre-employment transition services. This language comes directly from our RSA regulations. RSA states that the purpose of Pre-ETS is to provide an early start to job exploration and to assist students with disabilities with identifying their career interests, and that these career interests may be explored further through additional VR services. I have underlined the word may because some students will get all they need through Pre-ETS that are delivered to potentially eligible students and won't need to apply for the general VR program. The goal of pre-employment transition services is to increase opportunities for students with disabilities to practice and improve workplace readiness skills through work-based learning experiences in a competitive, integrated work setting, as well as to increase opportunities for students to explore post-secondary training options, leading to more industry-recognized credentials and meaningful post-secondary employment. Again, the 5 required pre-employment transition services are listed here. WIOA requires that VRS collaborate with local school districts and charter schools to provide or arrange for the provision of Pre-ETS for all students in need of those services. This means that these services need to be made available statewide, regardless of whether a student has applied or been determined eligible for VR. And any student with a disability is considered to be potentially eligible for Pre-ETS. In a bit, again, I'll be going through the definition of a student with a disability. Linked on this slide is the DVRS external webpage, where students, families, school staff, and others can find the staff that are assigned to each school. We learned that it is important to define the term required when we say the 5 required Pre-ETS services. We are only required to have Pre-ETS available statewide to those that need them. We are not required to provide them to every student. Furthermore, none of the provisions mandate that all 5 pre-employment transition services be provided to each student that we're serving, if all the services or activities are not needed or wanted. There is not a requirement that any one type of Pre-ETS precede another type, nor is there any requirement that a person receive a prescribed number of Pre-ETS. And of course, we need to again emphasize that schools are the primary provider of Pre-ETS, and our role is to fill in the gaps. Let's move on to understanding the definition of a student with a disability for Pre-ETS purposes. There There are three parts to the definition: disability, age, and education program. So let's talk about number one, which is disability. A student may be eligible for pre-ETS if they're receiving special education services from their high school. In other words, they have an individualized education program, or IEP, or if they have a 504 plan, or a student may not have any formalized plan through a school, but could have other documentation of a disability, either from a medical provider, a mental health provider, or from the Social Security Administration. Here's a template for the first page of an IEP, just to give you an idea of what an IEP looks like in case you haven't seen one yet. You can also learn more about IEPs by going to the Pacer Center website, which is linked on this slide. Pacer Center is a nonprofit organization that supports families of students with disabilities. They're called a Parent Training and Information Center, and every state is required to have at least one of these centers. VRS partners closely with Pacer to deliver workshops and information to families. So we've mentioned 504 plans, and here's a little bit more information about them. 504 is in reference to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. That act defines the rights of individuals with disabilities to participate in and have access to federally funded benefits and services, and that includes school services as well. Students with 504 plans are typically students that have accommodation needs, but don't require special education services to meet those needs. There are any number of reasons that a student will have a 504 plan. We often see students with physical impairments, ADHD, or mental health concerns that have 504 plans, but that, of course, is not an inclusive list of any sort of disability that might be accommodated by a 504 plan. This image is linked to a 504 document that you can pull up in order to see what a 504 plan might look like. All right, the second part of the definition pertains to age. This slide depicts the age range that students can receive pre-ED services, which is age 14 through age 21. You may also hear the term youth with a disability, which is broader, since a youth, for WIOA purposes, goes through age 24. The definition of youth primarily comes into play when we are talking about people who must receive VR services before entering sub-minimum wage. In any case, all students are youth, but not all youth are students. You are just going to be serving students. And here is another note about age to keep in mind. If a student turns age 22 during a regular academic year, so that would be fall or spring semester, the nice thing is that they can continue to receive pre-ED through that academic year or spring semester. There aren't many high school students that will turn age 22, so this will mostly impact students who are in post-secondary settings. The third part of the definition pertains to education programs. A student must be in an education program in order to receive pre-ED. Education programs include secondary education programs, non-traditional or alternative secondary education programs, including GED programs and homeschools, post-secondary education programs, and other recognized programs such as those offered through the juvenile justice system. So what do we mean by other recognized education programs? Bottom line, it can be a program offered through any entity as long as it provides a recognized credential of education. A recognized credential of education is a verification of an individual's qualification or competence issued by a third party with the relevant authority to issue such credentials. So a credential can be an educational certificate, a degree, a certification, or a government-issued license. Examples of programs that can be included could be, again, a GED program or a program, say, somebody who's obtaining a certified nursing assistant or CNA certification. It could be a registered apprenticeship program or any other short-term program like those that are offered at the Job Corps in St. Paul. Again, they count as long as they yield a recognized credential at the end. Also keep in mind that when students age 21 and under are enrolled in a post-secondary program, they are still considered a student during the summertime and other breaks. As I mentioned, students can continue to receive pre-ESS in post-secondary programs after they've graduated from high school. However, in order to do that, VRS must have certain documentation first. The next 4 slides will review the documentation that is needed. And again, this will be handy for you to refer back to. This is also in our guidance materials for reference as well. So as it notes here, there must be documentation that the student graduated from secondary education, that they have been accepted into a recognized post-secondary education institution or program, and that they have told us their intention or confirmed that they have accepted the invitation to enter into the post-secondary education program. Here are the possible items that you can obtain which fulfills the documentation requirements. Number 1, a copy of the student's high school diploma or a copy of their high school transcript which shows that they obtained a diploma, and either a letter from the post-secondary ed program that verifies that the student has been accepted or a college class registration letter. Now, there are likely to be circumstances when getting that documentation might be difficult. In those cases, you fortunately have an alternative. As long as you have a signed release from the student or their authorized representative, you can get the information directly from the education provider, either through a phone call or email, etc. And then you can just case note that you received that information. This slide gives you the direction on what needs to be included in that case note. Some students will take a gap year or a gap semester. We also can still provide pre-ESS during that time as well, and the length of time of the gap doesn't matter. The key is that we have documentation and that the student has graduated high school, that they have been accepted into a post-secondary education program, and that there is a seat or spot that is being held for them. So again, this can be in writing or in verbal confirmation that you get from the program. So let's recap what we just reviewed. All 3 of these categories must be checked in order for an individual to be able to receive pre-employment transition services. Number 1, they need to have a disability. Number 2, they need to be within the age range of 14 through 21. And number 3, they need to be in an education program that yields a recognized credential of education. So let's take a break here and test your knowledge about the definition of a student with a disability. You can take out a piece of paper or use your PowerPoint slides to answer the following 5 questions. First of all, note that all of these students have disabilities. Why don't you pause the recording, answer the questions, and then press play again once you are done and we'll review the answers. All right, so let's come back and review the answers. Letter A reads, Sean is 16 years old and is a sophomore at Rydell High School. The answer here is yes. He is obviously a pre-ed student because he is still in high school. Letter B reads, Brianna is 18 years old, graduated from high school in May, and is enrolled to attend North Community College in September. The answer again is yes. As long as an individual is enrolled in an education program, they are considered students on the breaks between terms. Letter C reads, Brad is 22 years old and attends Dakota Community College. So the answer here is it depends. If the student is receiving pre-ed, who was receiving pre-ed, turns 22 during an academic year, they can continue to receive pre-ed for the remainder of that academic year. If they turn age 22 during the summertime, then pre-eds must end on their birthday. The next reads, Sarah is 19 years old and attends Adult Basic Education GED classes. The answer here is yes. Sarah is working on her GED, which is a recognized credential of education. And finally, letter E reads, Aleman is 21 years old and attends Goodwin CRP for office skills training. So the answer once again is it depends. If the CRP does not have students take an exam for a recognized credential at the end of the program, then it does not count. But if it does yield a credential, then it can. So let's shift gears now and dig into each of the 5 pre-employment transition services and understand more about what can be included in each. You would we recommend, that you have the VRS Pre-Ed Desk Aid handy because we'll be reviewing that a bit on the remaining slides. The desk aid is also linked here in case you want to pause the recording and print it out. Another document that you might want to have handy is the Minnesota Pre-Ed Framework. So as we're going through each of the slides and each of the 5 pre-eds, we will be reviewing the definition as well as how to find the performance measures for each service within that Minnesota Pre-Ed Framework. The Pre-Ed Framework helps you to outline exactly what a student will get out of participating in pre-ed services. It also allows you to communicate with providers about what specific service you want a student to receive. The framework can also be useful when you work with schools to decide what is already provided by the school and what gaps VRS should fill. Finally, it is important to note that since pre-eds are provided based on needs, there again is not a requirement that a student receive all 5 pre-eds, nor is there a requirement that they achieve all progress measures within a pre-ed service. The framework is just meant to be a guide. If a student is in a work-based learning program, in other words, they have a work coordinator who works with them, our pre-ed framework allows you to see also how it aligns with the Minnesota Work-Based Learning Framework, which has been created alongside the pre-ed framework. You will see on the VRS framework that there is a code next to each performance measure. That code tells you where on the MDE Work-Based Learning Framework that same or similar item can be found. There's a link to the Work-Based Learning page on the MDE, Minnesota Department of Education site on this slide. As of today, that framework is still not posted on there. So if you go to the site, you can't find it, feel free to email me and I will send it to you. So this just gives you a little bit of a look at what that MDE work-based learning framework looks like. So next to each of their performance measures, you will also see a code which aligns to our PREETS framework. So again, it just allows us to see how when students are in work-based learning programs, they're often getting pre-employment transition services. And it gives us some language to say, how should we align services? What can I help with related to providing the PREETS services? Now let's review the first pre-employment transition service, which is job exploration counseling. Job exploration counseling is intended to foster motivation, consideration of opportunities, and informed decision-making. It may include exploring vocational interests, the labor market, in-demand industries and occupations, non-traditional employment options, and career pathways of interest to students. Job exploration counseling has a code of JEC on the PREETS and the MDE work-based learning framework. And there are 14 possible JEC performance measures. Now on to number 2, work-based learning experiences. Work-based learning is an educational approach or instructional methodology that uses the workplace or real work to provide students with the knowledge and skills that will help them connect school experiences to real-life work activities and future career opportunities. Work-based learning may include in-school opportunities, after-school opportunities, or any opportunity outside of the school setting. Keep in mind that we want to see students have experiences in an integrated environment to the maximum extent possible, and that all opportunities for work-based learning in integrated settings are exhausted before students are placed in a non-integrated setting. Furthermore, it is essential that there is direct employer or community involvement with work-based learning experiences. Work experience is really crucial for students with disabilities. Paid work experience prior to graduation is one of the top indicators that a student is going to be successful in employment after high school. Students with disabilities should be provided opportunities to experience paid work in, again, those competitive integrated jobs that take place in the community. So what are all the types that of work-based learning that are available to students? We have a pretty big list of opportunities that can be supported. Career mentorship, career-related competitions, informational interviews, internships, both paid or unpaid, job shadowing, practicum, service learning, simulated workplace experiences, student-led enterprises, work experiences that are paid or unpaid, volunteering, workplace tours or field trips, and youth apprenticeships. Keep in mind that if students are paid, that they need to be paid at competitive wages to the same extent that competitive wages are paid to other persons without disabilities and similar experiences. And if training stipends are given, again, they're paid to students the same way that they'd be paid to students without disabilities. Also note that unpaid work experiences are acceptable, but that VRS staff must consult with and receive approval from their supervisor before arranging for an unpaid experience, and that this approval must be documented in case notes. The reason for that is being that there are really strict labor laws around unpaid work, and we just need to be sure that we're adhering to those. So WBLE is the code within the Pre-ETS and the Work-Based Learning Framework for participation in work-based learning experiences. There are 62 performance measures for WBLE. The third required Pre-ETS service is officially titled Counseling on Opportunities for Enrollment in Comprehensive Transition or Post-Secondary Educational Programs. But we have shortened it to make it a little easier to Post-Secondary Education Counseling. You may be asking what a comprehensive transition program is. This is defined by the U.S. Department of Education as a degree, certificate, or non-degree program for students with intellectual disabilities that is offered by a college or career school. They are officially considered a CTP if they are approved by the U.S. Department of Education, and by being approved, students can also apply for federal financial aid, which is really nice. In Minnesota, we at this time just have 3 official CTP programs, which are Bethel University in St. Paul, it's called Bethel Build, and then there are 2 occupational skills programs at Central Lakes College in Brainerd and Ridgewater College in Willmar. So post-secondary education counseling has 2 parts to the definition, and on this slide we are reviewing the first part. The first part is about assisting students with enrolling in post-secondary education or training by helping them to understand how to successfully transition into a post-secondary education or training program, to identify what options are available for post-secondary ed or training, to understand how their career goals line up with the training options available, to help them in completing the steps for enrolling in post-secondary education programs. And you can also help them with learning about or applying for federal or any other type of financial aid option. Finally, it also can be about learning about the various supports and assistive technology that is available to students with disabilities who are in college, such as how and where to get alternative formats of textbooks, or how do I find out about the disability services offered on campus. Part 2 of the definition is to assist students with remaining enrolled in post-secondary education. So that can include helping them to learn about information on course offerings, career options, the types of academic and occupational training needed to succeed in the workplace, and how post-secondary opportunities associated with career fields or pathways would pertain to a student currently enrolled to ensure they're on the right pathway. Lastly, these services can help them in making decisions about changing majors and or education or training programs. Unfortunately, there are things that are not included in post-secondary education counseling for pre-ETS, and we've addressed that on this slide. So it cannot be about providing extra support to students to be successful once they are in the post-secondary education program. So some of our community rehabilitation providers offer what's called post-secondary navigation services, and that unfortunately cannot be provided as a pre-ETS service. So that service is often about helping students with keeping track of their calendar, understanding their syllabi, navigating projects, meeting with the disability services after they've been introduced to those services. So if students need that support and they're being served through potentially eligible services, they can certainly apply for the regular VR program if they need that service. So on the pre-ETS and work-based learning guides, frameworks, we have listed TEC is the code for post-secondary education counseling, and there are 22 performance measures on the PREETS guide. Okay, so number 4 on the list of required pre-employment transition services is workplace readiness training. Workplace readiness skills are a set of skills and behaviors that are necessary for most jobs. They are also sometimes called soft skills, employability skills, or job readiness skills. Workplace readiness training may be offered on an individual basis, in a generalized manner in a classroom, or other such group settings to provide programming to assist students with disabilities to develop social and independent living skills necessary to prepare for eventual employment. So the key is about social skills and independent living skills. So workplace readiness training could teach anything on this list: communication and interpersonal skills, financial literacy and some basic benefits information training for students, job seeking skills, understanding employer expectations for punctuality and performance, and any other type of soft skill that is necessary for keeping jobs, as well as navigating transportation options, particularly public transportation. And it also can be about training them in on public transportation. One thing to note is that workplace readiness training cannot be about helping students getting their driver's permit or their driver's license. That's a common question, and unfortunately, RSA does not allow us to support that. We also have a caveat to the term readiness with workplace readiness training. So if you recall in module number 1, we reviewed the Minnesota Olmstead Plan and the Minnesota Employment First policy. Bottom line, Employment First assumes that everyone is ready for work. But that's not to say that we don't want to help people build skills where there's ability to do so, because obviously that gives people more work opportunities. However, in cases when a person is not able to achieve a certain soft skill, we don't want that to rule them as being unable to work. So one example can be poor hygiene. So certainly it can be worthwhile to see if there are interventions that can help a person improve their self-care if they don't have good hygiene skills. However, if it's clear that they'll never be the most neatly groomed person, no matter what we do, then it's our job to meet them where they're at. We could seek out job environments where being neatly groomed isn't a priority. So here we list the code for workplace readiness training that's on the PREETS and work-based learning frameworks, and that is WRT. And there are 99 WRT performance measures, so quite a few to choose from. The final PREETS activity is instruction in self-advocacy. First, let's be clear about what we mean when we say self-advocacy. Self-advocacy is the ability to effectively communicate, convey, negotiate, or assert interests and/or desires, and to learn about self-determination. Self-determination is when people with disabilities have the freedom to plan their own lives, pursue the things that are important to them, and to experience the same life opportunities as anybody else in their community. In a nutshell, it means taking the responsibility for communicating one's needs and desires in a straightforward manner to others. So self-advocacy instruction can include anything on this list. So it can be about learning about disability and its impact. It can be about learning about how to request accommodations, services, supports, and assistive technology. It can be mentoring opportunities, learning about personal rights and responsibilities, and it also can be about participating in youth leadership activities offered in various settings. So we had mentoring starred on the last slide. because that can take many different forms, such as peer mentoring, disability mentoring, group mentoring, or e-mentoring. And we have all those different opportunities defined on this slide. ISA is the code for instruction and self-advocacy on the PREETS and the work-based learning framework. There are 12 ISA performance measures. So there are 3 other categories of pre-employment transition services, which are coordination, authorized, and services in support of PREETS. And I'm going to review the definitions in the coming slides. This is a visual to help wrap your head around the PREETS categories. So we have PREETS required services that we've just reviewed. And then there are PREETS coordination services, which are 4 very specific activities. There are PREETS authorized services, which are listed in the linked document on this slide. And then there are also services in support of PREETS. So I crossed out services in support of PREETS since these services unfortunately cannot be provided to students who are potentially eligible for VR. They can only be provided to students who are eligible for the VR program. But I have them listed here because you're likely to hear about them. They are on the PREETS desk aid, and so I just want you to be aware what they are, but unfortunately, students who are potentially eligible cannot receive them. So the 4 pre-employment transition coordination services, again, are very specific. And I'm going to go through them more specifically in the next training module on time entry and expense reports. But they're listed here. It can be number 1, attending IEP students for disabilities when you're invited. Number 2, it can be work with local workforce development boards that are part of the Career Force system, as well as others in the Career Force centers, and employers to develop work opportunities for students with disabilities. It can be work with local education agencies, which is schools, to coordinate and ensure the provision of PREETS. And lastly, this one's very specific, when invited, attending person-centered planning meetings for individuals who are receiving a Medicaid waiver. I took the 4 PREETS coordination services and categorized them because 2 of them are very broad. It's work you can do not on behalf of any specific student, whereas 2 of them are about services to specific students. So the broad activities are the work to coordinate PREETS with schools, as well as the work to develop work opportunities. The 2 individualized coordination services are attending IEP meetings for specific students, as well as attending person-centered planning meetings. So that just kind of helps you, again, wrap your head around these services a little bit more. And next we have the PREETS authorized services. Give me a second here. My notes get a little mixed up. So if funds remain, VR agencies may provide additional services to improve the transition of students with disabilities from school to post-secondary education or an employment outcome. And our RSA and WIOA lists out 9 activities that can be included in PREETS authorized services. Rather than listing out those 9, because they're pretty broad, we actually created this document called Staff Time Expense Charging Items for PREETS authorized services. So it's something I really recommend that you print out, that you have handy, and that you're thinking about when you're charging your time every 2 weeks on your time entry, because there can be any number of things that can be charged to PREETS authorized services. Certainly a real primary item is training, but it has to be just training that is approved by our learning and development team out of VRS. So when training is announced, look for this symbol. This symbol will be included on any training that can be charged to Pre-S authorized services. And there'll be a percentage. Either it will say 50% or 100%. Because if a training isn't fully about students with disabilities, it's only partially about them, that's when we have to charge 50%. But if the training is 100% about students with disabilities, then you can charge 100%. In any case, look for this symbol. And I just want to clarify, because you might be confused when you hear the word authorized, because we also have authorizations that we encumber when we are authorizing or paying for services. So Pre-S authorized is what WIOA calls out, and it doesn't have anything to do with purchasing services through our contracted providers. So we have Pre-S required, which means that states are required to have those services always available. And then they give us the list of authorized services that, on the other hand, we can use our money for only when we have extra money available. So we do have extra funds available right now, which is why we're asking you to make sure you charge your time to Pre-S authorized services. So as it says on this slide, Pre-S required means states are required to provide these. Pre-S authorized states are authorized to provide these under just certain conditions. Okay, we're almost done. I just want to review just a few resources. It's just a handful. And I really recommend, as you're new in your position, that you review the Pre-S toolkit. And it's linked on this slide. We go through the 5 pre-employment transition services. We define each of those services, and then also have included links to curriculum, to web tools, and activities. So this we have available on our website. It's available to our school staff and community providers to help them with ideas, and so you can share it with them as well. Some top web tools that you might want to look through are, first of all, explorework.com. This was created by our National Technical Assistance Center, and it goes through the 5 Pre-S services and has different activities for students. Another is Minnesota Career Information System, or MCIS. 80% of our high schools across the state have a subscription to MCIS. And all of our teams through VRS also have a subscription. So you can ask your RAM for your login information for your team. And we also have some training available on our SharePoint site. So if you can't find that training or you're having difficulty finding login information, you can contact me. Virtual Job Shadow is another website that we pay for access to. I also have some training available on Virtual Job Shadow. So email me and I will get you access to Virtual Job Shadow if you're interested in that. And then I also recommend that you look at our DEED website, the data tools that are available there. There's a tremendous amount that our department does in terms of labor market information, helping people just make decisions about careers, and there's just a lot of cool tools on there. Our agency also offers labor market information training where you also learn about those tools, and that's on your list of onboarding. And then I have, I get a lot of questions about curriculum for Pre-S, and these are the top 3, although it's not, exclusive. I mean, there's a lot of other things that you'll see in the toolkit. But these 3 were created specifically by VR programs. So T-Folio is linked here. Pathways to the Future was created in West Virginia. In Transition Tennessee is another one I'd recommend that you look at if you're interested in curriculum. All right, let's finish up with one last quiz. So on the next 2 slides, there's 10 questions. So if you would pause the recording once again, take out a piece of paper and answer the 10 questions. And then once you've answered them, press play, and then I'll review the answers. All right. So let's go through the 10 questions and the answers. Number 1, name the 3 parts to the definition of student with a disability. Again, that is disability, age, and education program. Number 2, pre-EDS can be provided from age 14 through age 21 if all other elements of the definition are met. Number 3, true or false, job exploration counseling can involve learning about jobs in demand. And the answer is true. Number 4, work-based learning experiences may include in-school opportunities or after-school opportunities. Number 5, true or false, students with disabilities in a work-based learning experience can be paid less than students without disabilities working in a similar work experience. And that would be false. Number 6, workplace readiness training assists students with disabilities in developing social and independent living skills. Number 7, pre-EDS required service, or what pre-EDS required service does career-related competitions fit under? And that is under work-based learning experiences. 8, true or false, attending IEP meetings is considered a pre-EDS coordination service. And the answer is true. It is one of the 4 specific pre-EDS coordination services. 9, true or false, the only activity within pre-EDS authorized services is training that is approved by the VRS Learning and Development team. And here the answer is false. Training is one item that you can charge your time to, but there are a number of other things, and we suggest that you review the staff time and expense charging items towards the pre-EDS authorized services document. We'll also look at that a little bit more in the next training module. Number 10, true or false, potentially eligible students can receive services in support of pre-EDS. And unfortunately, the answer is false. Only students who are eligible for VR can receive services in support of pre-EDS. So that is the end of training module number 2. As always, if you have questions, consult with your RAM, or you can certainly reach out to me at any time. Thank you.